Giriraj Prabhu for wonderful kirtans and Shubham Prabhu for Mridanga. So now we move to the next part of the program, which is the lecture. And today, it's a joy of immense proportions that we have with us Her Grace Citi-Shakti Mataji. And Mataji is a disciple of His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami Maharaj. And Mataji has been practicing Bhakti Yoga for over 25 years now. And Mataji, it's always it was our dream for me and my wife to have you with us, to associate with us. No, to associate with this program, to give us an opportunity to host you, to serve you. So thank you very much for fulfilling our dream. And Mataji, just a few words about Mataji. Mataji's bio is there on the posters, which we have circulated. But I don't want to repeat, but I want to sort of highlight three main learnings which I have acquired by looking at her bio. It's a kind of source of inspiration for me. First is that Mataji is a medical doctor with specialization in psychiatry, and she's a doctorate from the prestigious Imperial College London, which is ranked 3rd in the UK and ranked 10th in the world. I know that because I work in the university, so we are obsessed with university rankings, so I know. The first learning for me is that Mataji is a kind of a rare phenomenon for me, because I see Mataji excel in both professional as well as spiritual life simultaneously. And that's really a hallmark of a great devotee, because it requires you to strike the balance between the two. And second, Mataji is also into Grihasthashram, so managing Grihasthashram, perform exceedingly well in both spiritual and professional life requires a lot of dedication and, of course, most importantly, the focus and discipline. And I think that's a source of inspiration for many youngsters here to draw. And third, and the most important thing for me, Mataji, which really impresses me, is that the intersectionality you bring to the table, the intersectionality of your medical expertise with devotional service, the devotee care, devotee support programs you're focused on through lectures, workshops, and so on and so forth, where you use your vast 2 decades of experience in medicine to bring about or to combine the advances in scientific advances in mental health with Vedic teachings. That's, I think, I find it very interesting and phenomenal. So thank you very much, Mataji, once again for giving us this opportunity to host you. And I cannot express in words how grateful we are. Thank you very much.
I'm so grateful to be
here. And Mataji will be speaking today on the topic of the psychology of anartha nivriti. How do we overcome negative thinking? And I think that's practically the most relevant topic because we can't really find about this topic elsewhere. Because I think this topic can also transform us into a better individual, a decent human being, and above all, a good devotee as we move forward in our spiritual quest. So thank you very much, Mataji.
Thank you.
The floor is all yours.
Thank you. I'll have the whole floor. So thank you for having me. I've asked Krishna and Swaha lots of questions about every single individual here. No, I haven't. I'm reading your minds. No, I'm not doing that either. Don't worry. No, they speak very highly of you. And, I was very keen to come after they told me how enthusiastic everyone here is and how sincere you all are. So thank you for the warm welcome. Thank you for the wonderful kirtans. I did notice that a few people were not chanting, were not singing. And, it's the mind is so strong. It can distract us from so many things. Even the best thing can be right in front of us, and our mind distracts us to other places. So when it comes to understanding Krishna consciousness and Krishna, and actually our real selves, the mind really, especially while it's still conditioned, while it's still out of our control, while it still hasn't quite come on our side, is generally trying to move us away from that understanding. So that understanding really ultimately comes from another dimension, from the real dimension, from where we are actually from. And to the degree that we chant with attentiveness, to that degree that spiritual intelligence is awakened. Some of you in this room may have an IQ of over 150. Some of you here may not have such a high IQ. let me tell you, your IQ, your material IQ has got nothing to do with understanding devotional service. So I know we've had, maybe an hour or so of kirtan, but I wanted to just get us to all come together and maybe have some kirtan now where we're going to go slow, and we will just, I would really like to invite you all to also help me to chant better, because when we are collectively really being attentive and articulating, really listening, what am I singing? Yes, the melody is nice. So many different things. The instruments playing may be very nice. There may be a million things on our mind which we have to do after we leave here, which we may have done or forgot to do before we came here. Maybe it's waiting for you for next week, but your mind's already taking you there. Let's just put those aside and repeatedly put those aside. And let's come together. And the reason I'm saying help me to chant nicely as well is because we all have an effect on each other's consciousness. It's contagious. Consciousness is contagious. People often ask me, is mental illness contagious? Right? There's a lot of stigma around mental illness. Will I catch OCD? No, you can't catch a mental illness. But certainly, in whatever environment we're in, even if we sit quietly and say nothing to each other, we are picking up on each other's thought patterns. I don't know what the tube service is like here, but when you go to London and you're on the tube, you can come out, and if you leave a tube station or you come home after a day in central London, and you can feel like you're carrying the world's weight on you. Why? Because you quite literally are. All those thoughts and feelings that are around you, they've bombarded you. And unless there's a spiritual strength, there's a physical strength, and a kind of subtle psychological strength, we end up, and as I go through the class, we'll kind of unpack that a bit more. But often we are dealing with problems that aren't ours, and having desires that aren't ours either. So in this room, help me to go deeper with the chanting by everybody, not just listening nicely, but listen to what you're saying. Because what you're saying, our offering of love to Krishna, goes through different stages. The way it's expressed goes through different stages. And actually being attentive to what we're saying and repeatedly trying to be attentive to what we're saying and singing is a way of showing love, isn't it? It's a way of showing affection. Like when you two talk to each other, if you start looking the other way, this is your partner, your wife, yes? So if she's speaking to you and you're looking the other way, she's going to see that as you're not interested. If you're not interested, she's going to receive that as not being loved. Krishna is the same, and so are we, right? Love, the rules of love are the same. With that preamble, if we could have some kirtan, but let's go slow. Let's go deep, and let's go attentive. And if you find your mind wandering or your mouth becoming still, consciously bring it back, okay? Oh, this is quite high. Wowzers. Any way to make it a bit lower? Krishna Prabhu, is there any way we can do anything with the pitch of this harmony? No? All right, wow, Krishna's really testing us. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare 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 Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare 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 Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare 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 Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare All the ladies, please. All the ladies. Everyone. Hare Krishna. Gentlemen. Everyone, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Your date is called Radha Kunja Bihari, is that right? Radha Kunja Bihari ki Jai. Does this actually? Oh, it does work. It's just our instruments are very loud, right? Okay, cool. I'm just going to move over to the chair if that's okay with everyone else. I may not end up using that. Thank you so much. Do any of you need to stand up and stretch your legs? Been sitting in one place? Please feel comfortable. Stand up, stretch out your legs, and sit back down again. Don't get cramps. If you, maybe if you want to. Okay, please join me in a Mangal Archanam if you know the words, and if you don't, then what we're doing is we are invoking the blessings of all our teachers, those who are present and those who have physically left, but whose blessings are always there to be had and attracted by our sincerity. So, Om Gyan Timirantasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshuran Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Tadati Sapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Atapadakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Pancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So can I just check for my benefit and yours? Is anyone here for the first time? Anyone never been to these classes before? Is everybody here? Okay, this is your first time, and your first time too? Okay, and is it actually your first time? Is it your first time in this house? Is it your first time to a Krishna Conscious program? No. It's your first time to, and your first time to a program like this? No, but you've been to programs before? Have you been to programs? No, so you're completely brand new. Who brought you? You were? Okay. What persuaded you to come? Other than sleeping on the couch. What persuaded you to come? Experience something new. Okay. And, our hosts, Krishna and Swaha, Prabhus, they were very keen on this topic. Anybody else interested in this particular topic? Yeah? Why? Why are you interested in this topic? What is it that's attractive?
We go through it in our daily lives. We need a solution.
You need a solution to negative thinking. Okay. Anyone else have other reasons why they found it interesting?
I keep myself very much positive. But the thing is that if I see someone is negative, I wanted to change that particular person, and that sometimes harms me.
Mm.
and how to do that. I just want to know that if I'm not able to do, I need to leave that person.
Wow. Wow. Okay.
Or what I need to do? I mean, I don't know.
No,
Talking
that's
about your husband now, right?
My husband is very positive. I wanted to know for other persons. I have so many persons. They have another thoughts. I think so because as per me they are negative, but and it's causing me. It affects me sometimes.
Mm.
I want them to be happy in their life.
You want them to be happy for you?
For them. I
For
mean,
them.
they always talk about negative. I want them to be happy whatever they have, but they don't understand how to
Okay.
tell them.
Okay. Anyone else?
To improve ourselves still better.
Okay, so it's another way of self-improvement. Anyone else have anything that hasn't been said? No? Okay. All right. Well, I understand these programs are once a month here, and then the temple program on Sundays. Yeah. Do you cover topics like this in the temple? I know we're going to do it tomorrow, but generally, are these no? Okay. Well, actually, removing negative thinking is very much part of Krishna consciousness. Okay, very much part of Krishna consciousness. If we go back to what bhakti actually is, what is bhakti? Bhakti means love and devotion. But ultimately, bhakti, devotion and love comes from the heart. It's a process of the heart. And we have 3 hearts. Did you know that? Right. I bet in anatomy or in biology we were told you only have 1 heart, but you have 3. You know what our 3 hearts are? We have the physical heart, right? Hands up if you have a physical heart. All of us, undisputed. We have a psychological heart. Many of the things we think and feel, you feel them here, right? If I asked you where do you feel your feelings, you can feel them throughout your body. But a lot of things we feel in the heart. So there's the psychological heart, right? Everyone here in the room have feelings? Hands up if you have feelings. Yeah, right. And then we have the spiritual heart. The spiritual heart, which is not dependent on this body. In fact, this body and mind need the spiritual heart to survive. And bhakti actually means reinstating that spiritual heart. And that spiritual heart belongs to our spiritual self. Our spiritual self is our authentic self. Okay, also our authentic identity. What does authentic mean? It means real. We often talk about the spiritual identity as our permanent identity and our identity in this world as our false identity. Okay, actually, I find there's certain words of the English language that do more and more justice to what we're trying to say. I actually find the word authentic says more than our permanent self, because authentic means that it's covering all aspects of our real identity, from our appearance to our personality to our activities to our relationships, and those are as they were meant to be, as they should be. That's our authentic self for all time, independent of what's going on in this world. That's the authentic self. And we're trying to be authentic in this world, but it's hard to be when everything around us changes, including our mind and our body. Nobody's mind is the same as it was 10 years ago. And our bodies definitely are not the same as they were 10 years ago, right? So this bhakti means reinstating our authentic identity and moving away from what I would say a more accurate description is an artificial identity. Anybody know what the word artificial means? See, false and fake. We don't like thinking about our identity or ego as false. It was like, what do you mean? I mean, I live with this every day. I'm trying to be real. Why are you calling me false? So what's different about using the word artificial? Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Thank you so much. What do you understand more by the word artificial? Okay, possibly, yeah. But I mean, if you look at it in a derogatory way, but if you actually, pretense is more, I think, the word fake and false. What's artificial?
Not real.
Trying to replicate.
Okay,
Replica.
replicate. Yes, a replica, right? Replica. It's a sincere replica, right? An artificial Mona Lisa is still made sincerely, tries to be exactly the same, but something's missing. Something's missing. So actually, our transient state of self is an artificial state of self, because even this is created by Krishna. It's created by, Maya has 2 sides. She has Radharani, the internal potency, right? Yoga Maya, and then we have Mahamaya, who acts in this world to facilitate, oh no, I want an artificial version of the true pleasure because I want to be boss. Okay, so now when we turn away from a relationship which is with the most compassionate and with the most loving person, you can't really forget yourself. Like, you can't really lose yourself. Actually, you can forget yourself, but you can't lose yourself. Krishna can't take away who we are. We can't stop being us. Okay? Equally, if we want to leave him, the only way we can really leave him is by doing what? If you really want to leave a person in this world, what do you do? Okay, you might ignore them. Does that work? Does ignoring a person, I mean, how many of you have tried to ignore a person and only to carry them in your mind and heart all the time afterwards? Try ignoring your spouse, or your children, or even your best friend who you don't want to talk to anymore. Right? So ignoring them doesn't work. Replace them. Okay. And then when you replace them and that person starts doing and saying things that remind you of them, then what? Right? What else do we do to forget? Huh? We delete the contact. See, you do all these external things to get rid of the person. So we say to Krishna, okay, look, I want to go see what it's like to be the center of attraction. I want to be the main man or the main woman of the show. Can I go somewhere else? Krishna says, okay. But he says, I love you. I'm your servant. I'll never forget you. And if you actually want to leave, then not only do you have to forget me, you're going to have to forget who you are. Right? People do that. We do this. Sometimes to leave a relationship, we change everything about ourselves or big things about ourselves that might even remind us or bring us back to the same things that we did with the other person so that we don't remember them. Why? Because when we remember then what else comes up? When we do those activities, so those activities and that person are intertwined, right? So when we do those activities, we think of that person. But we also have to forget our relationship with Krishna. So he has to make this watertight. He says, okay, if you want to leave, you can't stop being you. He knows this. He says this, There never was there a time that you did not exist. Never will there be a time that you shall cease to exist. Right? No, I know these kings. He's telling Arjun this. So he can't delete us. He can't delete our real identity. And he doesn't want to because he actually loves us. And for him, it's a very painful thing. So it's okay. I'll do two things. One is, if you really want to leave, the only way you'll be able to leave is if you forget who you are. Because if you remember who you are, then you will inevitably remember me and our relationship. Even if you leave the place and you leave me. Okay? So you'll have to forget who you are. You'll have to forget our relationship, and then you'll forget me. Okay? So off we go. He says, but I'm coming with you. Okay, I'm coming with you. And as we walk away, as we leave, we bury our true identity or our authentic identity, our authentic activities, and who Krishna is to us authentically. Not who we perceive him to be in this world or who we create him to be to facilitate our desires, but who we want him to be, who he is to us as an individual, because we each have a unique relationship with Krishna. So we bury that. It gets buried deep, deep, deep. How does it get buried? Anybody know? How does it get buried?
Bring on newer memories, like a clean slate, you start new.
That's it. We create a new life. Anybody know exactly? Overwrite it, right? Anybody from the days when we had cassettes? You can reuse a cassette by recording over it, couldn't you? Right. The thing is, material nature cannot cover our soul. It can't delete the soul. It can't write over the soul. It can only cover it. Right? It doesn't delete it. With a tape recorder, you can delete what's there. Actually, with our material identity, we just get layer upon layer upon layer. Anybody here studies Shikshastakam? Right, the first verse of the Shikshastakam. Darpanam marjanam bhavamaha davagni nivarapanam. Shreya kerava chandrika vitaranam vidya vadhu jivanam. Anandam buddhi vardhanam pratipadam purnam rita swadanam sarvatmasnapanam param vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam. And the translation is glory to the Shri Krishna Sankirtan, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years. This is that dust, that covering. We're burying ourselves in dust. We didn't even choose jewels, we chose dust. And extinguishes the fire of conditional life of repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we are always anxious. You know, I just want to give a reminder that we are by nature eternal. But we're not just eternal, we're eternally wise. But we're not just eternally wise, we're also eternally wise and blissfully connected. This is what Satchit Anand means. Anand, that bliss comes from connection. And those are the three things all of us seek here. In fact, all the dust that we accumulate to bury our real self in is just different permutations and combinations of different ways of trying to make ourselves immortal, live longer in a better state of health, enjoyment, connection, relationship. If you think about it, all the different things, whether they're selling it on Instagram or in your local shop, okay, whether it's an advert in the newspaper, it's all there to heighten our pleasure, but our pleasure actually through relationship. Why do we wear nice clothes? Why do we make ourselves confident and affluent and beautiful? Why? So that somebody validates us and somebody takes an interest in us. Right? So this is what I mean by it. It's an artificial replica. There's some sincerity, some sincere desire to let's recreate that love. That's what we have. I want to recreate this love. But in doing so, we bury our authentic identity more and more and more. And this is a wisdom that's before religion. Okay, before giving religions different names and different ways of being practiced. It's before religion comes this understanding that every single person on this planet is seeking for these three things: a blissful connection, and to refine that blissful connection eternally. We don't like loss. Okay, we don't even like the idea of loss. We try and avoid that. We have insurance for everything, just in case plan, right? This is how they make money from grahastas. Okay, the just in case plan for everything, right? Why? To play into that fear of I might lose it, because it's not our nature to lose it. Our real nature is to have that blissful connection all the time. So where does the mind come into it? What is the mind? So in the Bhagavad Gita, you know, Krishna gives us this very simple but perfect understanding of how is it that a perfect person interacts with an imperfect environment. So we have our bodysuit, the senses, okay, and then that's constantly inputting into our processor and hard drive and whatever, you know, there's so many different names you can give it, the operating system of the mind, okay. Above this is the intelligence, which discriminates. Okay, well, what are we going to do with the stuff on the hard drive and in the operating system, all the data that's being input? But above the intelligence is you, the authentic self. When that's buried, we're just pulled and pushed by these senses. But today we're focusing on the mind, because ultimately, and we understand this from the 4th canto and the 29th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a lot there on the mind. We understand that the mind is quite literally like a storehouse, a hard drive of all the different experiences we've had in the past, the experiences that we are yet to have, which are just there in seed form, okay? And ultimately, it's just the subtle form of what it executes in the body, right? You look at something like anger, for example, okay? Anger's it's a mental state, isn't it? There's feeling and there's thought. But that mental state affects different parts of the body in different ways. What happens to your eyes when you're angry? They get big, right? They might go red, right? They might well up with tears. You might cry. What happens with the hands when someone's angry? They may punch. They may slap. What happens to the legs when someone's angry? They may kick. What happens to the stomach when you're angry? It feels like it's on fire, doesn't it? Your chest and gut feel like they're on fire. So the mind is really, it's everything in the material world manifests from our minds. Everything in our spiritual life, okay, and this is when we're talking about when we're getting into advanced stages where we are also cultivating our internal life, when one is starting to wake up to who they are, all of that reality manifests from our soul, okay, with Krishna's mercy. But here, everything that we're surrounded by manifests from our mind. So understanding our hard drive and our operating system is a really, really powerful way to progress more quickly through our Krishna consciousness, when we understand the impediments. So this word anartha nivriti, this session is called the psychology of anartha nivriti, right? Does anybody know what anartha is? Obstacles, yeah. Unwanted, yeah. Unwanted. Unwanted obstacles. Unwanted obstacles. When do we want obstacles? That's not true. We ask for obstacles. When do we ask for obstacles? Anybody here go to the gym? Or go to Go Ape? Or like climbing frames or things like that, right? You ask for obstacles. Why? Because the obstacle feels like an adventure. So this is what spiritual knowledge does. It makes the obstacle turn into an adventure. So understanding the mind will help us to do this, because anartha nivriti is about removal of unwanted obstacles. And some obstacles actually do need removing, but others need to be seen as part of the adventure. So this is what we're going to deep dive into a bit more. So anartha nivriti is the process of removal, and this process of removal has got different aspects. But this removal of unwanted things is actually really what we're doing is we're unearthing that authentic self. We're digging, right? We're just like you dig out from, maybe you buried something. Anybody here ever buried something when they were a child and looked for it again in the garden? Did anyone ever do that? Right? Some people do that. They bury. See, dogs do it. Right? They go and they bury something, and but the earth moves underneath. So I'm not sure how they still find it. Maybe there's a time limit or something. But so we're unearthing. So this anartha nivriti is that part of our spiritual life when the digging starts speeding up. See, every aspect of Krishna consciousness removes unwanted things. But this particular stage of anartha, it's a very specific stage of spiritual life. Okay, and it is underpinned, anartha nivriti takes place in its most effective way when our practice is regulated and offenseless. Okay, and we're going to go a bit more into that also. So regulated, offenseless practice is what speeds up the removal of unwanted obstacles. And it's far easier to be offenseless when we are understanding what our mind is like. And this is what we're all here for. How do we overcome negative thinking? Because it's usually because of negative thinking we make offenses, isn't it? Our own frustrations, whether they're because somebody else is not feeling positive or we're not feeling positive, or things haven't gone our way. So this regulated offenseless practice speeds up the revelation of who am I, who is Krishna, and what's my relationship with him. So anartha nivriti is a essential and important stage, and we don't have to wait lifetimes or millennia if we just take some care to understand how we can establish ourselves in it properly. Now, the whole understanding the 9 stages of devotional service from Shraddha to Prem is a class in itself. So I'm going to stick with anartha nivriti unless you want to go elsewhere in the Q&A. But for my talk, I'll stick with that. First of all, though, let's expand a little bit more on the mind. I'm going to share something with you from the Srimad Bhagavatam, from chapter 29, 4th canto, verse 65 to 68. If you want to open it on your phone, on Vedabase, you can. And I'm thinking, let's just recite this verse together. If you want to pull it up on your phone, if you look for Vedabase, SB 4.29.65, it'll come up. So I'll chant the first line, then you repeat, and so on and so forth. I'll go slowly for those of you who maybe don't have the words in front of you. Tenasya tadrisham rajal. Tenasya tadrisham rajal. Lingino deha sambhavam. Lingino deha sambhavam. Shradhatvananad bhutotro. Shadatsvanan bhutorito. Namanaha sprashtum arhati. Namanaha sprashtum arhati. So, translation. Therefore, my dear king, the living entity who has a subtle mental covering develops all kinds of thoughts and images because of his previous body. Take this from me as certain. There is no possibility of concocting anything mentally without having perceived it in the previous body. And this is a very powerful statement, even if someone doesn't accept reincarnation. Even if you don't accept reincarnation, you've still got some experience of a previous body in the womb. The body in the womb and the experience in the womb is very different to once you come out of the birth canal. Okay, so this is something, just bear in mind that the mind has experienced things before the body has. There's something else in the Bhagavatam, in the third canto, which talks about how the subtle body of the mother and the child are basically one, whilst the child is in the womb. The umbilical cord connects them. So actually, many of the things the mother experiences during the pregnancy, the child will experience them. And even modern science, when you look at embryology and child development, they're all for, recommending that, I mean, I've literally seen pictures of mothers with headphones on their bump. They want to teach their child a new language, or make them a maths genius, or have them listening to, high megahertz sounds so that they're relaxed, so many different things. So this, there is no possibility of concocting anything mentally without having perceived it in the previous body. It goes on to say, O king, all good fortune unto you. The mind is the cause of the living entities attaining a certain type of body in accordance with his association with material nature. According to one's mental composition, one can understand what the living entity was in his past life, as well as what kind of body he will have in the future. Thus, the mind indicates the past and future bodies. Sometimes in a dream, we see something never experienced or heard of in this life. But all these incidents have been experienced at different times in different places and in different conditions. The mind of the living entity continues to exist in various gross bodies, and according to one's desire for sense gratification, the mind records different thoughts. In the mind, these appear together in different combinations. Therefore, these images sometimes appear as if things never seen or never heard before. So what I want to share with you is my model of the ocean of the mind. Okay? Is there something there? Okay. I'm not going to be able to draw on this. I may. Oh, yeah, that's cool. Fine, then you can pin that up. Anybody read those verses before? Come across them before? But you didn't know there was that much. Srimad Bhagavatam's got so much in it. It's just really... there's nothing in your life that you will experience that isn't covered in the Srimad Bhagavatam. If you read the Srimad Bhagavatam, there's somebody somewhere out there who's gone through what you're going through, and Krishna gives an amazing answer and wisdom. And so do his devotees on how to deal with it. Please try, if you can, once you finish Bhagavad Gita, read Srimad Bhagavatam. It's just literally, it really is like a touchstone. It's such a powerful way to just transform things that you've carried for a long, long time. So I'm going to draw something. You might have to give me a few seconds. Don't worry, I'm not going to sit here for hours. I can't draw very well anyway. So while I'm writing, anybody tell me here what they had for breakfast? What did you have for breakfast? That good, huh?
I couldn't recall. I had a juice.
You had a juice,
Yeah.
a light breakfast. Okay. What did you have for breakfast? Okay, you had toast. What did you have for breakfast? Toast. Okay. Apart from for you, pretty much it came to the mind pretty quickly, right? It's something you can think of easily. What were you doing this time last week? Right. Oh my God. Okay. Can you tell me what you were doing? What's the date today? Today's the 10th of June. Krishna, can you tell me what you're doing on the 10th of June, 1995? No, right? Why? Because our mind has got layers. If we were to remember every single thing we did and every single thing we're exposed to, we'd be so overwhelmed and bombarded with thoughts and feelings that we wouldn't know which ones to follow. Okay? So our mind is designed in such a way, it actually describes in the Srimad Bhagavatam how the mind is so expansive. Because it's subtle, it can reach any corner of the material universe. material universe. Okay, can go anywhere in the material universe. This is why some people can astral travel. And I had a question once from a student. I do talks at universities, and this one student came in. I'll never forget him, because I've been doing student talks for 20 years, and in 20 years I've still not quite come across someone like him. When he walked in, it wasn't just his height. He was very tall, extremely tall, maybe about 6'5". It was the way he was standing and the way he came in. I was like, okay, this person looks otherworldly. Like, they've got a physical body, but you can see they're bigger than their own body. And I was doing the talk on time and creation. And he sat down, he patiently listened, looked far too big for any of the student chairs, and waited patiently. And at the end, he said, oh, can I speak to you alone? And he told me he'd been astral traveling since he was 8 years old. And how he can just sit there, and while he's waking, he can move his subtle body, and he can go anywhere in the world, anywhere he wants to. And I thought, he definitely has this. If he has this much control over his subtle body, he clearly has this from a previous lifetime. And he says, oh, I have a teacher as well. He says, but my teacher says that when we become perfect at astral traveling, we can also move into other universes. And he says, but I don't know how to do that, and I thought you might be able to tell me. And okay, so anyway, we had a conversation about dreams. We also had a conversation about how actually the soul doesn't have the same limits as the mind. And if you forget just going to other universes, you can leave the even material realm. I mean, look at Narad Muni. He goes anywhere and everywhere, right? He can move through all three worlds. So our mind is very, very expansive. But not all of that expansive mind is accessible to us immediately. Just like basically your breakfast is just about available to you. Why? Because the mind's got layers. It's like an ocean. The ocean is deep and vast. We can't really even measure where the bottom of the ocean is, because if we were to go to that depth, we'd probably leave our body before we got to the bottom, right? And I'll explain how and why. Let's if you can just attach this. So the reason I'm showing you this like this is sometimes just having a visual, even if it's a few lines, can make sense of an analogy more easily. So look at this. We've got an ocean, right? Now let's look at the ocean. The ocean's deep. The conscious mind is the surface of the ocean. That is the area where when you dive in, you don't need much equipment. It's snorkeling. Anybody here been snorkeling? So this is like snorkeling. Snorkeling is you just put on goggles, there's a tube, you look down like this, you don't even have to be a good swimmer. And you go somewhere like the Bahamas or Australia or anywhere which other than the British Sea or the English Sea, you'll see beautiful, colorful fish just in the surface. Yeah, just in the surface. You can see. Did you need to be an expert swimmer? No, you didn't need particularly good equipment. Actually, with many of these places, you don't even need to put on your snorkel equipment. You just look and you can see it, right? So this is the conscious mind. How much of this vast expanse of the mind, this hard drive, okay, that we've been carrying out, how much of it do you think is accessible? Like this, very easy to access. How much? What percentage? Let's say our whole mind is 100%. Obviously, what amount of that is accessible, like that? Give me a number. 5%. Okay, some pessimists here. 0.1%, even more pessimistic. Wow, my God. Anyone else? No one's willing to be more generous than that. No? You know, sometimes I go to talks and I ask this question, people say 50%, 60%, some people say 30%. Okay. Yeah, conscious is. It's about 10%. Okay, but remember, these are arbitrary figures. These are more to give you kind of proportions. Now, subconscious is scuba diving land. Anybody here been scuba diving? You need special equipment for that. You need an oxygen tank, you need headgear, everything. And you know, you dive deeper. You can only remain down there for a certain amount of time as well, right? As long as your oxygen lasts. So this is a special environment where those things which we don't need to have in our conscious, which are still relatively fresh, or maybe we've repeatedly done, or we're very strongly connected to, can be accessed, but perhaps through when we are in a alpha state or theta state, often when we're in deep either hypnosis, semi-hypnotic states, when we're extremely relaxed, also in a dream state. Okay, or you might be in a therapy, either some sort of creative therapy or a creative space or a talking therapy. You can access the subconscious, or a strong emotional state. Sometimes when in a strong emotional state, people make something called a Freudian slip. They want to say something and they end up saying something else that they actually feel but didn't mean to say. So this is the subconscious, scuba diving land. Okay, the subconscious and unconscious together. Okay, this together makes 90%. Again, it's arbitrary. This is the rest of it. 90% of it is only accessible under special circumstances. Okay, unconscious mind, even more deep. This is David Attenborough land. Anybody ever watch Blue Planet? You all know David Attenborough? Okay. He's so famous and he's so loved, and his voice is like home for so many people that even though he doesn't go anywhere to do the documentaries anymore, when his voice lends itself to a documentary, you take it seriously, don't you? He could be talking about anything. You hear his voice, kind of like, oh, we've got to listen. This must be fact, because he's put his voice to it. So he made a documentary called Blue Planet, and they had to spend special cameras down to the parts of the ocean where even sunlight doesn't reach. Okay, and if you watch that documentary, you'll see even the creatures down there, very unusual. They are not the kind of fish you want in your fish tank. Okay, they're not pretty, nice, golden coloured. One of them I saw had one eyeball on its forehead, which didn't even look like an eyeball, and it was really a very, very unusual place, very unusual climate. So this is the reason I call it David Attenborough land. Is it's one has to often this is the area where when we are in a very, very deep sleep state, or someone's taken us into deep hypnosis, almost regression. Those are the things that you see there. And sometimes when you have a bizarre dream, see, as we heard from these verses, because we're carrying so many different impressions, and many of them have been had in different bodies. Now imagine if you were an animal in a previous life, and you remember doing something as the animal, but in a human body, you remember it. It's going to come across as a bit bizarre, right? It's going to seem a bit strange. One devotee I know, he does past life regressions. And he's always been very interested in seeing what was the previous life of a devotee. How did they take to spiritual life in this life? Or how did they take birth in devotee families? And one really stands out to me. So remember, he came to our medical school to regress the whole year. It was very interesting. It was very interesting to watch where people went. But this one particular one that he was telling us about was a devotee who said, as he regressed them, they went back to their immediate previous life, and they actually remembered being a blade of grass, because they were so low down as a blade of, like, they were so underneath, like they could tell there was nothing else they could be other than a blade of grass. And they remember their last moment was when someone wearing, a saintly person, I think they were wearing saffron or something, their soft foot squashed the blade of grass, and that was what took them out of their body. And because a saintly person touched them, they took a devotee birth next. So this kind of thing, now imagine you have that memory of someone stepping on you while you're having a dream. In a human body, you're going to find that traumatic. As a blade of grass, you're thinking, well, that's what I'm meant to do. People are meant to walk on me. But as a human being, if somebody steps on you, you have that memory in a dream. So you think, oh my God, I had this horrible dream where somebody stepped on me. So do you see this unconscious, some things need to stay in the unconscious, and we can only cope with them when we dream about them, because if we were to think of them in waking life, they could be quite traumatic. Okay, so why am I explaining this? The reason I want to give you this model is because even if we park our previous lives, let's just think about this lifetime. Right now, in this room, how many different things are there for us to look at? Thousands, right? How many different sounds are there? Hundreds, okay? How many different textures are on your skin? Many, many. How many different smells are there? Fragrances in this room. People have got different deodorants on there. Everybody's sweat smells different. You've used different laundry conditioner. So many, and all of these are being inputted into our senses. Everything's coming into our mind, but you're all listening to my one voice, hopefully, of everything else you're listening to. Okay, your eyes are on me, so you're focusing on one thing, but that doesn't mean your mind's not taking all of that in. It puts it somewhere, puts it here. Now, what's similar between a glass of water and an ocean? What's similar is just like a glass of water has oxygen bubbles in it, so does the ocean. What bubbles at the top? The biggest bubble, right? So we have all these different impressions which get buried into our unconscious. Right? Look, call them tiny little oxygen bubbles, and in our subconscious. But what happens is when you do something repeatedly, like attracts like, right? That bubble becomes bigger. So they come together, all these, okay, let's say 10 times you saw the same movie, or you saw a movie or you saw an advert that tells you, for example, name a toothpaste brand. There you go, okay? Colgate. You might not even have Colgate on your shelf. Maybe you do, but you said Colgate first. Why? That advert, you've heard it so many, Colgate, 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 so many times that repeatedly, those bubbles, the biggest bubble comes up and pops, right? Prabhupada actually describes it like that in a purport as well. He says like things just bubble up to the surface in the mind. Now, the reason I drew these lines is because there's almost like a subtle protective fabric between each of these three layers. That fabric, the only thing that can permeate it is when something becomes strong and big, like when we repeatedly do something, it comes to our conscious mind. Oh, I've got a desire to do this. And we think, oh, it's my desire, you know? Why? Because we've exposed ourselves to it so many times. Yes. Oh, that's okay. Well, I wish her the best. Of course, of course. No, that's absolutely fine. Thank you for coming. Hare Krishna. So did I. It's okay. Yeah. Sure, no problem. That's okay. That's okay. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. But the other thing is, if something happens to you that shakes you up, right? When the ocean gets shook up, the bottom layers, the middle layers, and the top layers get mixed up, right? And that can be a sudden event. It can be a strong emotion. So many things can break up that layer, right? But the main thing that causes things to pop to the surface is when you repeatedly do something over and over and over again. So has anybody here had an experience where you've been going about doing your day, day's like normal, or your life's like normal, and you think, right, you know what? My life, my day, everything looks like how I want it to look. I've got everything I want. I'm satisfied. And then something comes up in a few weeks or after a few months and goes, pop, maybe you should try doing this. Maybe you should avoid doing that. This isn't working out for you, sir, so much. Or, I've got everything I want. Why am I feeling anxious? Why am I feeling angry? What's going on? You know? Why am I desiring something when I've got everything? Why? There comes a tipping point when we're exposed to something over and over again and it comes to the surface. Hare Krishna. The other thing is, it's not just what we expose ourselves to passively, but even more so what we expose ourselves to actively. Okay? So, for example, movies, songs, television. They can seem benign and harmless, right? Oh, it's okay. There's nothing illicit in the program. Oh, it's okay. You know, there's nothing that is against Krishna consciousness in the program. Of course, you know, everybody's got different, there's all different types of movies and songs that are made out there. But the intention behind making the movies and the songs, it has always a seed to reinforce the artificial self, doesn't it? Keep life here on the stage, keep your stage, your act here going, right? Take on a new costume, try something else, try something new. Even the adverts in between, they're there to tell you that what you have already isn't enough. Isn't that how every good salesman works? I mean, Instagram, social media, whatever, it's become TikTok, it's become expert at bombarding us with adverts. But we've all had it. I remember the days when the encyclopedia guy would come and knock on the door, right? It wasn't Instagram or TikTok, it was knock knock, but you know, he would come and knock on the door and give us a reason to buy an encyclopedia. What's a good reason to buy an encyclopedia? They will make you feel like you don't know enough, isn't it? It's going to be really useful. How much of that encyclopedia do I actually need to know? So creating that need. So this is what I mean. This is when you actively watch something, you absorb it more. Okay, the impression goes deeper. It's not just this subtle little, tiny little bubble. So the reason I wanted to explain this is when we're looking at negative thinking, some of that negative thinking is fresh. Okay, some of that negative thinking is historical from earlier in this life, and it's only just coming up now because something's triggered it to come to the surface. Some of the negative thinking you've caught from other people because we have a human wireless network, right? Thoughts, feelings travel through ether, they travel through space, which is why when you're with a loved one or when you're close to someone, even if you're on the other side of the world, when you're about to phone them, you'll find they might just phone you just then or message you. Like, I was just thinking of that person. Why? They picked up on it with the human wireless network. Okay, so in the same way, we're all plugged in. So if somebody's around in our environment having particular thoughts, they're getting carried towards us. And we are like, our mind is like an aerial or a satellite dish. Wherever we're tuned into, that's the signal we'll pick up most strongly. Okay, so understanding the mind is a very important part of Krishna consciousness, because in one sense, once we understand our minds, then we can set about understanding how much to react and what to do about the different things that come about. So let's get into a little bit more about where does all this come from. Right, so we've understood a little bit about desires. Desire is the beginning of everything. But before desire, there's a step called exposure. We don't ever desire anything unless we're exposed to it, right? There's nothing any of us want that we haven't been exposed to at some point. If you don't know about it, you're not going to want it. Nobody wants a Mercedes unless they've seen one or heard about it. Nobody wants chocolate unless they've heard about it, or somebody's shown them that it's amazing, or they see their friends in ecstasy when they're eating chocolate, right? There's this, our desire is evoked by exposure. Even the desire to avoid is evoked by exposure. How do you know what to avoid? Because someone's told you what to avoid. Or you've encountered it and you've got signals from that very thing, oh, I need to avoid this. It's creating a bad reaction in me. So first there's exposure, then there's desire, okay? And from that, we will contemplate, we'll think about it, we'll imagine what it's like to have it or not have it. And then we'll set about creating an action plan, willing it, right? Will has to come before action, right? Where there's a will, there's a way, right? Because we'll find the way. The way is never the problem. Anybody here who's struggling with procrastination, you're usually struggling with will. There's many reasons why our will might be weak, and there's many ways to strengthen it. But if the will isn't there, then often the way, we can't find it. So let's look at Anartha Nivritti. What do we understand from scripture about Anartha Nivritti? This removal of, how do we, there's like, Citi-Shakti, you're telling me that I've got like millennia worth of desires sitting there, bubbling in my unconscious mind. I don't even know what they look like. I don't know when they might come about. They may pop up in my dreams. I mean, who here has woken up from a dream and felt strongly like you were still in it, like feeling that emotion, like, oh my gosh, it's like, is that it then? I'm going to chant Hare Krishna and basically I'm just going to be constantly bombarded by either desires and thoughts I'm going to end up acting on. What's going on? How do I get rid of this? What is it? What's going on? Where do they come from? And how can I curtail them? So, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he writes a wonderful book called Madhurya Kadambini. Anybody here read it or heard of it? So, Madhurya Kadambini is actually an explanation of the 9 stages of devotional service. And when he describes Anartha Nivritti, this is the stage before Nishtha, before somebody's devotional service becomes fixed in body, mind, words, and one is of strong faith. He describes that anarthas, these unwanted things, come from 4 different sources. Okay, so the first source he describes is it comes from sinful activities. Now let me explain this word sinful. Does anybody, we're using an English word here. It's actually, the Sanskrit is dushkatrota. Okay, yeah. So this is sinful. Sinful actually means, do you know the root word sin? The root of that word means to stay away from God or without God. Okay, so activities that I'm going to make sure you forget about Krishna. Okay, so these are activities which are usually in the mode of passion and ignorance. You're eating foods, doing activities, speaking in a way that is really not very not even good human-like. Right? So sinful activities, right, they lead to usually unwanted things that are an obstacle because they actually very grossly keep us away from wanting to discover ourselves. That's easy to understand. Oh yeah, makes sense that my mind is full of things which maybe I've done in the past or exposed myself to, which have planted seeds of desire and created buds which are yet to fructify, which are going to keep me away from Krishna. After all, I'm here. That one's pretty easy to understand. But then the second type is those anarthas, unwanted things that come from pious activities. Now you might be thinking, well, how do pious activities create a block? Anybody have an idea? Why might good activities, things that are deemed good in this world, kindness, doing charity, being a good person, how could that become a block? How can that lead to bubbles and seeds of desire that will keep us away from our true self? How might that work? How could things like... Okay, one could become proud. What else? What else? What do good things... Do people mostly pray when they're suffering or when they're happy? Suffering, right? When we're happy here, comfort here is like being comfortable in a prison. Okay, when you're comfortable in a prison, you forget you're in a prison, right? So the anarthas from pious activities have a unique way of keeping us away from our true self. They maintain and exacerbate the illusion that this is home, right? If you put nice soft furnishings in a prison, it stops looking like a prison. Put a nice soft mattress in a prison, it stops feeling like a prison. You start having better meals than everybody else. You're not just having that sludge that they get and gruel, and what you're getting is, a nice 3-course meal. Stops feeling like a prison. Or you get comfortable there and the outside world looks scary, then prison becomes comfortable. I've worked in prison services before. I used to do psychiatric assessments for people who would be at the magistrate's court awaiting their hearing to see whether they needed to go to a mental health unit for treatment or whether they should be tried. And I met many people who'd literally just left prison 3-4 days, maybe a week before, and they'd committed some petty crime. Why? To go back to prison. I'd ask them why. Like, oh, it's just scary out here. I'm a nobody out here. But in prison, I'm someone. I'm comfortable there. I'm safe. So this is what comes from pious activities. Kind of the better the devil you know than the devil you don't. This consciousness that, okay, I'm a bit scared of who I actually am because I might have to be a nobody for a bit while I'm still, losing my somebodyness here. The third type is the unwanted things that come from when we make mistakes in executing our devotional service. Now, these ones we don't tend to worry about so much because actually what's explained by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is that in due course, as we, the potency of chanting and things like that, they tend to, and especially the sincerity we have, that tends to negate. Krishna accepts our sincerity, so he doesn't really accept our mistakes. And this is why we have Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda. They don't accept any offense. And then last but not least, definitely not least, because this is the source of unwanted things that sticks around even right up until anarthas, unwanted things that come from offenses. Okay, offenses come usually from negative thinking. So it brings us back to what the whole purpose of this talk is how do we overcome negative thinking? So this does actually, I'm going to focus on, because anartha nivritti is such a big topic, right? Because anartha nivritti is a bit like, right, we're about to go into a storm. There's nothing we can do about the storm. You're just going to have to hold on tight. But what happens? Arms get tired, people let go, right? And people drop there. What's the first thing that happens when people are stressed? You may find you chant less. You may find you chant more inattentively. You may read less, thinking the things that I need to take care of. I need to take care of the storm. You can't do anything about the storm. There's some storms you just can't do anything about. It doesn't matter how much you cry and scream and shout at the clouds, they're not going to stop the lightning. Okay, so you've got to stay on the boat holding on. But there's different impressions in the mind, all these different anarthas that give us fear, anger, envy, insecurity, so many different things, misidentification, illusion, lust, the desire to enjoy, the desire to be happy here outweighs the desire to know who I am. And so I want to share a few things about the first two, how do we, first of all, tackle the pious and impious activities? Because, offenses is, when we understand Shraddha to Prem, by Nishtha, which is fixed devotional service, 75% of your unwanted things are gone. And that's the first three categories. Those from pious activities, impious activities. And by Ruchi, we also have those things that are removed from devotional service. By Nishtha, pious and impious activities, and those things which are caused by improperly executed devotional service are removed, but then by Ruchi and Ashakti, they're absolutely or removed. They're gone completely. So we're only left with the consequences of offenses. And by then, somebody's very careful with being offensive, because you don't have such a heavy burden. You can analyze where you're being offensive, right? When the mind is full of so many negative thoughts, right? It's like being in a sandstorm. If I said to you, in the sandstorm, identify which grains of sand are red and which ones are blue and which ones are white, you'd be like, I can't see. So if I said to you right now, if somebody's in the thick of their Nartha Nivriti, if I asked you, oh, which ones do you think are from pious activities? Which ones from impious activities? Which ones from improperly executed devotional service? And which ones are from offenses? We don't know. When we're in the thick of something, we don't know. Isn't it? When you're in really, your mind is troubled or your life is troubled, you lose sight of what's causing what. So we're going to focus on the first two, impious and pious activities, because they're the ones we can very clearly, practically actually work on now and need to work on now. And those of you who are already cultivating an internal relationship with Krishna and are further along in that process, maybe you can think back to how you did this and maybe give us some tips. So, these impressions on the mind and reactions in the mind, they affect so many things, from our mood to our intelligence, our personality, how we perceive things, our dreams. Krishna in the Bhagavatam explains how, when a person dreams, it's an opportunity for them to work out karma, so they don't have to do it in their physical body. And it can happen even more so when we take to devotional life, because you've probably stopped all the things that, you may have had seeds of desires for in your mind, and you've stopped those activities, but those seeds are still there. So you may have dreams where those things are still played out. And Krishna's like, okay, you just expel it out in your dream life. Reactions in the mind, of course, ultimately become our karma, because we end up acting on what's going on in the mind. Things like mental illness also, often is playing out of previous desires and actions and consequences. And also how we see things in our perspective. I remember a pastime in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam of a personality, a Brahmin, who loses everything. He loses everything. So he's a very saintly soul, and then he becomes materialistic, and then he loses everything. And when he loses everything, he remembers Krishna. And he prays to Krishna. He says, thank you for this blessing. And he goes on to say, he's not and what's amazing is, and very interesting, is he doesn't thank Krishna for the taking away of everything. What he thanks Krishna for is that you took away everything, but you gave me the awareness to understand that it was your mercy. Even if you're not a devotee, stuff gets taken away. Even if you're not spiritual, stuff gets taken away. But to have the perspective and understanding that this is a blessing, that's something very different. And anarthas are the same. There's actually anger in itself, greed in itself. The problem isn't those things. The problem is our relationship with them. We hold on to them. We hold on to them, or we're averse to them. And in holding on to them or being averse to them, they have more effect on us. Anyway, the sum and substance of what I'm trying to say is, this is what life is. Everything in the mind manifests in our reality. Okay, so how do we overcome our negative thinking? I want to give you 4 practical things that you can do. Now, the first one is something we've already talked about. Change what you expose yourself to. That is such an easy place to start. Take an inventory. Take stock of, what are you listening to? What are you watching? Okay. Is there anything you can do to upgrade the quality of what you're watching? Is there anything you can do to improve your attentiveness when you are watching high quality things? Let me give you an example. So when I was a young devotee, when I was a new devotee, I was at university. And I'll be honest, our life wasn't as challenging. We didn't have social media and digital media. In fact, the brick phones came out in 1998, 99. They were like massive. They were like thick like this, you had to pull out the um, aerial and things like that. So it wasn't a pleasant experience to carry around a mobile phone. And they were just phones. There wasn't a lot you could do. And as they evolved, you could maybe play Snake on them. So we weren't bombarded with as many things. So listening when we'd hear class was easier. People of a certain generation can hear a class for an hour and a half and it's okay. Now, hearing every single person I know who gives classes has to have a 30-second clip, a 3-minute clip, and then the full class. Why? Because people's appetite and tolerance is so little. So this exposure thing is about balancing, not just reducing the things which are, I think this is dead, battery's gone, the things which we're hearing and watching which are planting seeds of desires or painting a picture in our mind which isn't conducive to a Krishna consciousness or is just giving us another reality. How can I improve the quality of that? Because sometimes just stopping altogether can be difficult. But also equally, how can I increase my attentiveness when I'm listening? Again, we had cassettes when I was younger. It was, if you wanted to hear a class, you had to show up and hear it, right? You had to show up and hear it, or through some great endeavor, find a recording on a cassette. I used to take care of my spiritual master's tape ministry. And if somebody wanted recordings of his classes, I had a high-speed tape recorder, right? You could, I think a 90-minute cassette or a 60-minute cassette, it did it at 3 times speed. But they were like, people were so grateful to get that cassette. And I remember I'd had the same class in playing over and over again because it had so much value. Now classes, they're just available on tap. We're so bombarded. You've got, every day you probably receive 10 links for different YouTube videos and classes. And when you have that, the mind thinks, oh, I can have this anytime. And whenever we have anything that we think we can have anytime, we never have it, right? Or we rarely have it, isn't it? It's like when we have the company of someone anytime. How much do you talk to them? How much do you talk to the people in your household? Because you know you can have a conversation with them anytime. This is the mind, taking things for granted. So do both things. With exposure, first of all, increase, find a way to improve the quality of what you are listening to frequently, and reduce, at the same time, also cut out the stuff that you know, okay, this isn't really good quality stuff for me. But then the things that you are listening to, especially if it's digital, try and listen to the digital stuff as if it was real life. So if you find yourself doing 50 million other things while you're listening to a digital class, right? People sometimes cook, or they're, I don't know, doing their laundry, or they're doing a million other things, or they're having a conversation while the class is on in the background, or they're interrupted so many times. Right here, right now, you're listening. You're fully present. You're fully present. Your body might be hurting a little bit. Your mind might drift off sometimes, but nowhere near as much as it would if you were just, this was some recording that you'd put on later on and you're doing another thing. So if you're listening to digital classes, treat it like you would a live class. Sit down with your notepad and actually hear it. Be present. Because I kid you not, the quality of your hearing will have such a transformational effect on your heart. That just what you hear then, even if you attentively hear 15 minutes, well, because there's that sincerity, you're showing Krishna your sincerity. You're like, Krishna, I'm going to give you my time. Okay? There's not just a human wireless network, there's a transcendental wireless network. So Krishna receives that. This person's trying. Despite there being so many bombardments, this person's trying. And the heart opens up to receive. It doesn't take a long time to hear the best thing, to do the best thing. If I asked you all, how long does it take to surrender? You know why we say a moment? You look at Parikshit Maharaj. How long did he take to surrender? 1 week. How long did Arjun take? 45 minutes. Right? Because Krishna had to speak to Arjun for 45 minutes. Maharaj Parikshit had the Bhagavatam in 7 days. Maharaj Gatvanga? 1 moment. Right? 1 moment is actually 1/11th of a second. That's how long it took him. He literally looked at his watch. Oh, Surrendered. Okay, so this is a thing with that sincerity. That sincerity empowers us. So I'm going to just say it again: exposure. Reduce the poor quality exposure and increase the high quality exposure. And that means the quality of your listening as well. The second thing is, and this moves on from this exposure, because exposure ultimately will feed your desire. It 100% will. And because we've been exposed to other things, the other desires will also come, but it's okay. You can see when you're growing a garden of roses, you'll see there's some weeds there, but that's okay, because if you're tending to the roses, you just get rid of the weeds as they come up. Don't be surprised. Don't be like, oh my God, I took to chanting. Why are now all these different things coming up in my mind? Because it's being cleared. This is what purification means. All of you who've cleaned a room, you'll know you have to see the dirt. When you start sweeping the floor, you can't spread out. It's all over the place. You can't really see it. When you sweep it, it all comes in one pile and you're like, that was a dirty room. Okay, but you have to look at it. If you go, oh no, I don't like the look of that, I'll just put it under the sofa. It's still there. Okay, so when you chant, when you read, when you hear, when you're in this kind of environment, it brings everything up. So don't be surprised if the process of chanting, especially your japa, brings up nonsense in your mind. It's meant to do that. Before the bliss comes the clear out. All right, you've got to make space for the bliss. When you do spring cleaning, you want to replace your old tatty clothes with new ones. You've got to clear them out first. Okay, so this second tip is strengthen your intelligence by hearing spiritual knowledge, because what it'll do is it will change your perspective. So not just your desires, but also how you assess things, how you read the room. It will change your North Star. Every experience we have, we measure its value relative to something. It's always value is always relative, isn't it? Weight, traditional scales, what does it do? You look at a scale. In India, they still use them. You go and buy vegetables from someone in a store. They don't have digital weighing scales. They have to faff around with batteries. They just have their weights, and it's a balancing thing, right? It's relative, right? So everything of value is relative. So when we use spiritual knowledge, when we hear spiritual knowledge, the intelligence which is stronger than the mind allows us to function with a perspective. It's called Gyan Chakshush, the eyes of Shastra, the eyes of wisdom, which are Krishna's eyes, because Shastra is his story. He's telling us, it's not a history, it's his story, right? His story, he's telling us about himself. This is my story. And actually, your story is in here too. Because when you hear about my pastimes, you know you're somewhere in there too. You've just forgotten who you are. And I'm going to remind you. Because when you start remembering me, you'll remember who you are. So strengthen your intelligence to change your perspective. That way, your obstacle becomes an adventure. An obstacle becomes an adventure. So that's the second point. Third point I want to share is there are inevitably something we call prarabdha karma. Things that come up in our lives that they've bypassed the bubble popped in my head and I decided to do it. It's just ended up happening to us. It's kind of, well, how did this befall me? Where did this come from? Why? I went into this with so much sincerity and, so many good wishes and good intentions. How has this all gone wrong? And sometimes it can happen after years. Maybe a financial investment, maybe a relationship, maybe your own house is collapsing, maybe a familial relationship. Who knows? It could be so many. Maybe it's your health. Maybe you're somebody who looked after your health so much and like, well, how did I get cancer? I'm such a healthy, happy person. How could it happen to me? Or how could it happen to my loved one? When these things come up, we can always ask ourselves, is there something I can do with this that I can offer to Krishna? Because, our mind is so skewed. It's so against us wanting to find our authenticity that even when you have good things in your life, they'll tell you don't have them, right? I've heard many a devotee tell me they resent their wealth and they resent having such a big family. They got their wealth and a big family because of pious activities, right? They resent it. Why? Oh, I have to keep going to these social events because my family are always getting together and I want to go to the temple. Okay. Oh, we've got so much money. and like I have to dress nicely, and there's an expectation I have to wear diamonds, and I just want to dress simply like a sadhu. I just want to wear dhoti kurta, right? You start resenting, but this doesn't help. Dovetailing helps. So this resentment, attachment, and aversion, they're the same thing. Affection and aversion are both two sides of attachment. Okay, affection and aversion. So if you love your money too much and are so into your family, distract to the point of distraction, that's not helpful. If you're averse to them, that's not helpful. But dovetailing, really helpful. Really helpful. So those things that I'm averse to, or those things that I have affection for, how can I dovetail them so that they don't just generate, so that I avoid generating more movies to be in this world, but also I'm able to offer it in some sort of service. It can be a wonderful thing to have a family who's big. It means you've got loving affection there, and where there's love and affection there, you can influence hearts, you can change lives. Wealth can be used, suffering can be used. Suffering can be used to develop insight. How can I use my suffering now to serve Krishna? What can it fuel me to do? Maybe it's fueling you to become more detached. And the last one, which I'm going to split into 3 parts, and then we'll open up for some questions. Okay? Endure. Endure. And I'm thinking, oh God, just tolerate? Really? You're a psychiatrist and that's what you come to us with? Just tolerate it? Where's your compassion, woman? You do this for a living. Okay. So I didn't, that's why I didn't open with endure. You'd be like booting me out. Again, get out and don't come back. What do I mean with endure? There is a beauty to endurance. We know there's a beauty to endurance because we admire people who take part in endurance sports. Right? Ask a sprinter who do they admire. They usually say they admire the long distance runner. Right? Endurance. Someone's got stamina, resilience. Even in this world, we test each other's love. Right? We even test employees. You have a probation period. Right? You're just going to have to endure it. Suck it up. We're going to just make you work hard. There's a relationships we have there. Krishna has a relationship with us. We have a relationship. He wants to see. I'm going to give my whole self to you again. I want to make sure you're in it for the long haul and you're not going to turn away again. I want to make sure. And so some things we have to endure. And with time, they pass like a storm passes. There's not a lot you can do about it, but it passes if you wait. Just like our feelings. As human beings, we don't like experiencing difficult feelings. But I tell you, as a psychiatrist, no feeling lasts forever. We maintain it because we become either averse to that feeling or we develop some affection for it. Some people develop affection for their sadness. They identify with it so much, it's who they are. They become bewildered when they don't feel sad anymore. Or their anxiety. Like I've had patients who have treated for anxiety and they then tell me, I feel like I'm not motivated anymore. I feel like I've stopped being motivated to live. What have you done to me? I said, no, I've removed your anxiety. You were living out of fear before. Now this is a chance. You've got space to now live out of love and empowerment. So now you have to find those things, right? So we can become affectionate towards all sorts of things, even negative things. So this endurance, Srila Rupa Goswami, he gives us 3 tools, psychological mindsets that help us with endurance. They help us with endurance. Anybody know what the 3 are? They're in Nectar of Instruction.
Enthusiasm, patience, and determination.
Yes. Enthusiasm, patience, and confidence. Yes. So confidence and determination. Yes. So let's start with the first one, patience. Again, I'm coming back to the English language. Okay, so patience is actually our capacity to tolerate our circumstances without immediately seeing the results of our endeavor. Okay, the capacity to tolerate our circumstances without immediately seeing the results of our endeavor. We are an impatient society. We're used to getting everything like this. I remember internet, when it was wired and you heard that noise, right? When you join up to the internet, you couldn't use your phone. You had to be patient, but it was fine because, wow, this is quicker than what I'm used to anyway. So it was brilliant. And then Wi-Fi came along. And now there's like ultra fast, super fast, hyper optic. I mean, they're coming up with new terms all the time. Blinken, the page is not just changed, the adverts have all changed as well, right? So patience is such a underestimated quality and a scarce quality, because the world we live in doesn't encourage patience, because impatience is very rajasic, right? It's very tamasic. It's actually excess rajas leads to tamagun. So this excess passion leads to ignorance. You look at anything that's done in excess, you end up being in a slump with it, whether it's drugs, sex, overeating, whatever it is, anything, right? You end up being in a slump. So enduring with patience, working on our capacity to tolerate our circumstances without immediately seeing the result of our endeavor. One thing to remember in Krishna consciousness is right now, it feels like our endeavor is greater than our result. Why? Because we don't understand the complexities and intricacies of Krishna's reciprocation. I liken it to an antibiotic. When you take an antibiotic, it's treating the disease of the infection. It doesn't treat the symptoms straight away. For that, you need to take painkillers and all sorts of, there are other things, right? Our life in this world is kind of, our different varnas and ashram are like the symptom control. Right? They keep us comfortable enough here that we carry on taking the medicine of Krishna consciousness. But the medicine, the antibiotic, whilst it's killing whatever infection you have, if you don't have the symptom control, you're not really aware of what it's doing. Nobody sits there going, I wonder how many bacteria my second dose of antibiotics killed, right? You don't think about it. If you trust your doctor, you take it, and you'll patiently wait for the result. And one sign of the result is that your pain might be gone, your temperature might be gone. But we're also impatient, so you get the symptom control. So this is how Krishna consciousness works. It's like an antibiotic. It's there, working underneath, but the symptoms may not be, symptoms of material suffering don't go away straight away. So this can feed our patients. I don't really understand how this antibiotic works, okay? But Krishna's there, working away, digging deep for us, helping us to unearth our real identity and our love for him. And all this eternal wisdom and being blissfully connected to him. So patience, really, really powerful thing to cultivate. And even if you don't, I'm not saying only do it in your Krishna consciousness, do it with other things. Develop patience, like not getting up and going on your phone straight away, not expecting an immediate result through doing everything digitally. There is a beauty to still reading paper books. You have to turn a page. You have to go and pick up the book and you have to carry it with you. There's something about that, there's our 5 working senses. There's a harmonious way for them to work together. Touch and sight work so powerfully together. I know some of you are typing notes, but believe you me, if you write them, it makes such a big difference. Such a big difference. So endurance is made easier with patience. Patience can be cultivated, okay? And introduce it in small increments. The second quality, or the second psychological mindset that helps us is confidence. Actually, let's do enthusiasm next. What's enthusiasm? Okay, so it's an emotional state, excitement for something.
Motivated for something.
Okay, so there's a motivation. Eagerness. Okay. Is it always apparent? Is it always apparent? Is it always on display? Is someone's enthusiasm always apparent? You think mostly yes? You're saying
Yeah, mostly yes. Enthusiasm, you can see enthusiasm in a person.
interesting. Who here thinks you can't always see enthusiasm in a person, even when they're enthusiastic? Do you want to say more? And do you know why? It's because a lot of people focus on enthusiasm being a feeling and an emotive thing. That's only one dimension. It's like saying love only gives you a particular feeling and you've got this glazed over look. Love is a verb. Enthusiasm is a verb. It's doing, okay? Enthusiasm, somebody here said motivation and endeavor. Okay, Prabhupada actually defines enthusiasm as endeavoring with intelligence. Endeavoring with intelligence. So if we just go with our feeling, you'll be enthusiastic about one thing one day, another thing another. One day you're enthusiastic about washing pots in the temple, then you're enthusiastic about cleaning the floor, then you're enthusiastic about leading kirtan, then you're enthusiastic about the next thing. Because why? You're rushing after the feeling of enthusiasm. Okay, and actually this is called utsahamai. Actually, Madhura Kadambini Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he describes this as a very important stage of the beginnings of devotional service. We need it. We need that rush of enthusiasm. It's like young enthusiasm, right? That excitement, like, yeah, this is so cool. But as your spiritual life develops, and this is what you might see in more mature devotees, they don't have their enthusiasm necessarily on display externally. But you know they must be enthusiastic because decades later or years later, they're still doing the same thing they did before. Just like a long-lasting relationship. If people are still together, you can understand this person's enthusiastic to be in this relationship because they are still together. And I'm not talking about people who are miserably together. I'm talking about people who are happily together. You know, there's some enthusiasm there, right? The enthusiasm is that endeavor and motivation, which is fueled by applying the endeavor intelligently. Like, where shall I apply my intelligence? My endeavor, so that I get maximum results. Yes, this might be fashionable right now in the movement, or this might be fashionable in my community, but for me, I need to apply myself here, and then I will progress in my Krishna consciousness. When we apply our endeavor with intelligence, that is what gives us sticking power in any process, and especially in our Krishna consciousness. Okay, so when you're looking at your enthusiasm, try and balance out the feeling versus the endeavor. Where are you putting your enthusiasm? Is it just dragged by the externals? Because again, then you're just following the mind, and it's almost like because we are perfect, we keep chasing after creating a perception of perfection. And we do it in our devotee communities as well. Right? We get attached to being a devotee in this world rather than being a devotee. And so then we'll move from this thing to the next, seeking the enthusiasm that comes from that's generated by being validated for being a devotee here. Does that make sense? Right? We can have we don't want to be career devotees. Does that make sense? We have this phrase in my work as well, professional patience. You know, it's like sort of career devotees, professional patients. We don't want Krishna sends us our experiences, even our mental health crises, as a warning to say, you know, this is just a sign that what you were doing before just isn't working for you. Time to reevaluate and do things differently. Okay, so when we find ourselves struggling in the devotee community, it's time to take stock and reevaluate, where do I need to apply my endeavor? Okay, let me get some good advice and counsel. Because if we just can move from whichever group validates us the most, you'll have a great career here and you'll come back as a devotee, but again, you'll only carry on where you left off, which will be from that very same place. And then last but not least, with confidence. All right, despite this, the mind is nothing. It can reach every corner of the material world, but that's just the material world. The material world is nothing. The holy name is everything. All of it, Shastakam explains that all of Krishna's transcendental potencies are just contained in his name. Name, form, quality, pastimes, the ability to remove all suffering, to bestow all auspiciousness, to reinstate the nectar for which we are always anxious. Everything's there. So whilst we understand the mind is complex and it has all these layers and it can do all these amazing things and works to a different time, space continuum and can reach everywhere, still compared to our relationship with Krishna and our real self is nothing. It's just a part of us. And we outlive our mind. We outlive our body. Okay, so we should be confident, Krishna confident, that I'm engaging in a relationship with somebody who already unconditionally loves me, somebody who already wants me. You know, in this world, we look for somebody who will love us no matter what, warts and all. I just want you to accept me for who I am. Even when I behave badly, everybody wants that, right? This is why people crave going back to their parents, especially if they've had good parents, because their parents usually just accept them and love them, even criminals, right? So we know this. Krishna loves us. Krishna accepts us. And everything is born of Krishna. You know, there's this really powerful sentence. Krishna sends his devotees like the Guru and other wonderful saintly souls. Prabhupada, he spends a lot of the fourth canto explaining the mind in these purports, in these verses. And then there's this one sentence which crushes all of it. He just says, oh, but simply by following the instructions of the spiritual master, the mind comes under control immediately. Immediately. Oh, okay. So I can control the entire ocean just by, listening to my spiritual master. It's like somebody who knows how to navigate the sea. They bring the entire ocean under their control. A huge, vast thing, a little boat takes control of an entire ocean. Why? By following instructions. So please have confidence. Don't be scared. Sometimes when we start to understand something, we have to realize its vastness first. Yes, our mind is, we're never a product of just this lifetime. Our mind is huge. And remember, whoever you're married to, whoever's in your family, even your own children, your employers, employees, other devotees you meet, you're never really meeting the person who's a product of this lifetime. They're a product of so many lifetimes, of being in so many movies, characters, roles and responsibilities. Be confident that the process works. Hold on tight. And more than anything, be kind. Be kind to yourself, because if you're kind to yourself, you will be kind to everybody else. Be kind to yourself. Krishna is never horrible to us. Never. There's nothing that Krishna has arranged for us that is motivated by a lack of kindness. It's never motivated by wanting to punish us. Okay, if we perceive it like that, that is our perception. But he is never motivated by those things. Never. Okay, even when he's kicked, Brigumani kicks him in the chest, he asks Brigumani, is your foot hurt? Because he realizes his own strength. And he realizes the strength of his love for us. He is the embodiment of everything we are trying to become. Whether you're trying to become patient, humble, tolerant, compassionate, he's all of those things. And he's the most humble because he'll do anything to get us back. Anything. Anything. So thank you so much. I've been speaking for quite a while now, so I'll open up to some questions. And we've mentioned a lot of different things, so over to you. No questions?
Would it be helpful to use affirmations?
Yeah, that's a good question. So affirmations. We all have an internal dialogue. So, we were talking about these things that come up. It's not always just desires. Often they're statements, right? Beliefs about ourselves, beliefs about the world. And those beliefs are a product of things we've heard over and over again, right? If somebody's told us repeatedly we're beautiful, we could walk around with that self-belief. If somebody's told us we're too short, we walked around with that, oh, not very intelligent. We walk around with that belief. Right? And that belief gives us the perspective by which we live by. So, and it's one of the reasons I didn't include this is, I guess it was stating the obvious, is you can always replace a negative internal dialogue with a positive one. And it's important to do that. First of all, it's important to discover what our internal dialogues are in various situations, right? Because we'll generally find in the situations where we suffer the most, we have a negative dialogue, right? So for example, people often suffer financially, often regardless of how much money they have, but more in terms of how much they perceive they have and how threatening it is for them to either lose their money or not have enough. Do you see what I mean? So like sometimes you'll see videos of kids in underdeveloped dancing happy. They've got barely a cloth on their back because they don't perceive having less money as a threat. Do you see what I mean? So same with relationships. Things can seem threatening depending on what our internal dialogue is like. To a person who fears abandonment, just their partner leaving out of the door every morning can feel threatening. To somebody who doesn't fear abandonment, who likes independence, who feels empowered when their partner's doing their own thing, they're happy when their partner leaves. So it's important for us to check our internal dialogue and practice replacing it. But that affirmation, sometimes clutching onto affirmations which are just the opposite, isn't helpful, because antidotes aren't always the exact opposite. Often, especially with the mind, they're just a slight modification. Okay? So often just even recognizing, okay, I'm scared of being abandoned. What is it that I actually want? And there's layers to that. And there's layers to understanding, okay, if I'm scared of being abandoned, what is it that I want? Well, someone's always going to leave. So it's impossible for me to have an affirmation that you have to stay with me forever. But an affirmation that's very real, especially with understanding spiritual life, is that I'm never alone. I'm never alone. Because Krishna never leaves us alone. Never, not even for a split second. So affirmations can be very powerful, where we're not just doing a mechanical, okay, I'll just say the opposite. But kind of understanding, all right, what do I want? I don't want to be alone, so I'm scared of being alone. It's not just I'm scared of being abandoned, I'm actually scared of being alone. But I'm never alone. So going through that thought process and finding an affirmation that is accurate, not just in this world, but actually in all layers of ourself. Does that make sense? Thank you. Thank you for your question. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji, for your wonderful session. I have two questions. One is material. What would be the impact of watching cartoon by children long time?
Is that your daughter? Is that your daughter? Is that mummy? Do you watch a lot of cartoons? It's okay. I watched a lot of cartoons. When I was a little kid, this is what we used to get. We didn't have the timetable of television on a screen. We had it in a paper magazine called Radio Times and TV Times, because we only had 4 channels. And I used to make a timetable in my Christmas holidays of what I was going to watch, because it was so exciting to do that. So I get it. So it's not a material question, because when we're in a devotee, when we're in a spiritual path, everything's spiritual. Okay, because the secondary aspects of life support our primary aspects, the way we conduct them. What's the impact? You know, with children, I think it's important to not fear exposing our children, but understand that kids will always be exposed to something. What's more important is, I think, and more helpful, I've got a teenage daughter, is guided exposure. So they're going to be exposed. That's the world we live in. Whether it's a cartoon or social media or friends, there's going to be exposure there. But when it's guided exposure, that, okay, I'm here, I'm in this with you, I know what you're watching. Not like I know what you're watching, but I know what they're watching. They feel free, comfortable talking to me about what they're watching. We can discuss it. Our children we should try and cultivate relationships where our children feel they can speak to us within the boundaries of their own privacy as well. Because as children get older, they want their own privacy as well. Does that make sense? And being a good parent is hard. Being a parent is easy. Being a good parent is hard, because we have to evolve to our child's needs. You can't parent a 12-year-old the same as you did when they were 6. And a lot of parents fall into problems with their kids when they try and do the same things and have the same expectations. Up until about 10, 11, kids will be obedient. Okay, because the subtle umbilical cord hasn't been cut yet. There's still very much a shared mind with the parents, a desire to please. After 11, 12, as puberty kicks in, the subtle umbilical cord gets cut. Their own transient or sense of who they are in this world starts to develop. And they almost have to, and if you look at this, even psychologically, they almost have to cut off. They almost become, sometimes people go, oh, my teenagers become really selfish. Well, they kind of have to become insulated to protect themselves while they figure out what's going on. And at that time, they need boundaries, but they also need open dialogue within those boundaries. And then after 16, as Shastra Prabhupada explains, then you start to become their friend, so that they've developed the confidence to make their own decisions. So what is the impact of watching cartoons? Depends which cartoons you watch, because these days they have very adult cartoons as well. There are programs that they have which are rated 12, which I wouldn't watch, because I don't even think I wouldn't want it going on in my living room, so why would I watch it on TV, right? The other thing is, and what's your name? Nandana. Where do you watch your cartoons, on TV or on like an iPad and stuff? Laptop, right? Do you think you watch too much, or do you think you think you watch too much? Right? the reason I'm asking what TV or laptop, because the thing is, the way digital media is created now is to keep us scrolling. Yeah, just keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. So for yourself, just understand that it's not just entertainment now. It's almost like they're being entertained by you, because you're making them a lot of money. By you becoming literally quite disabled, you're losing, every time we scroll, we lose our ability to change activity, becomes weaker and weaker and weaker. Because how many times do you think you have to do something before it becomes a habit? So depending on how complex it is, anything between 66 times and 283 times. So between 2 months and a year, right? Everybody's picked up their phone as an alarm clock more than 300 times. Habit means automatic, right? So scrolling is automatic. When something's automatic, it means it's bypassing your will. That's great when it's a good habit. It's not so great when it's not a good habit. So if you want to, for you, just think about it for yourself. What do you want for yourself? So before you think about content, just like, I think sometimes changing where you watch the cartoon, like sometimes people don't, like, even you might find you prefer to watch your entertainment on an iPad. Why? Because it's easier to access. You watch it on the TV, you have to type stuff in, you have to change channels, you have to do, it's such hard work, isn't it? I say that in jest, please take it the way I meant it. We've become so lazy because things have become so automatic. So ideally, we don't want to be exposing ourselves to that. Next best thing is curate, watch things that actually help your consciousness. Third best thing is, okay, at least limit it, and limit it by movement. Give yourself almost categorical breaks where you exercise your will to stop watching. Okay, and a lot of the apps and stuff, they have stuff built in. You'll know probably better than mum, right? All the apps have stuff built in that just cuts you off after a certain amount of time, just to keep your own brain healthy and have the life that you want. But I'm not just speaking to you, I know I'm looking at you, I'm talking to myself and everybody else. We live in these bodies, and we live with this mind. If we can live in them and with them in such a way that it helps our spiritual life, it will be a lot easier. And we'll have a good quality life here. We don't have to suffer here to become self-realized. It's just we end up putting ourselves in those situations. And we don't have to. There's nothing in Shastra where Krishna says, well, sorry, you have to suffer if you want to surrender. You don't have to suffer to surrender. Surrender automatically comes where there's affection. Is that okay? Anyone else?
Since the entire session was on how to overcome negativity, so there are situations through your life that you have been wronged by people, and you tend to develop some kind of aversion towards like whatever somebody's telling is wrong. They might have nefarious intentions. They don't have true intention, right intention. And you just start disliking people in general, not one particular person, like people in general. So how do you...
That's a very good question. What can happen is when our trust has been broken a lot, whether it's by one person repeatedly or many people, we actually lose trust in ourselves. And so we find it easier to keep ourselves away from other people so that we don't have to repeatedly assess whether they're trustworthy or not, because we've now lost judgment. Hang on, I'm really bad at judging whether someone's trying to con me or not. Better I just avoid everyone, because then I don't have to repeatedly make that judgment. So one, we've lost trust in ourselves, especially if we're finding, to the degree that we don't trust other people, we've also lost some sense of trust in our judgment. The other side of it is also that ultimately Krishna is behind everything. Everything that happens for us. When we are disconnected from understanding this, we're disconnected from the hand and the intention behind everything. Let me give you an example. Here you've all had a splinter, right? Maybe you've had a mother or your father or someone you love and trust come with a needle to come and pull out the splinter. A splinter is just a tiny little piece of wood. A needle's a big sharp thing, right? You're letting someone come in with something more painful, more dangerous than a tiny little splinter to remove your current pain. Why? Because you trust the hand behind the needle. So sometimes we've been put into a position which feels like a lot of suffering to remove another suffering. So trust the hand behind the pain. And this is why spiritual life is so important, because we reconnect with the why of everything, not just the how. Yeah, science gives us the how everything works. Krishna consciousness, spiritual life gives you the why of everything works. Does that make sense? So you can build it slowly, bit by bit. Trust yourself again. Give yourself space to make mistakes in your judgment of other people. This human condition is not perfect. We will make mistakes. In relationships, friendships, people give up on friendships so quickly. But actually, good, strong, loving relationships, two people allow each other to make mistakes and learn what the other person likes and doesn't like, what their expectations are, how their expectations change over the years. I mean, our mind, our body is constantly evolving. We evolve together, we change together. But where there's that anchor of developing and nourishing our sense of self separate from our roles and responsibilities with the world, but connected to Krishna, then when the world around us is changing, when the people around us are changing, when our own mind is changing, our body is changing, it really provides a much needed anchor, because it doesn't change. It gets deeper and stronger, but it doesn't change for the worse. This is the difference between spiritual change and material change. Material change inevitably comes with loss and deterioration. Spiritual change comes with growth and more happiness. That's the change. I mean, if you look at the science of devotional life, when you get to prem, prem is ever increasing. We can't even think of that. Something being ever increasing, there's no limit. Why? Because there's no limit of time and space. Time deteriorates everything. So yeah, try these two things: trusting yourself and maybe going a little bit, connecting in some way in terms of cultivating your sense of self separate from what the world thinks you are. Yeah.
Thanks, Mataji, for your great I just want to ask a question about dream. So sometimes we get dream sometimes it goes totally void. Like when we wake up in the morning, we would feel like we wouldn't have felt anything. It would be like complete blank.
Yeah. You've forgotten.
Yeah. So I want to ask why there's differences. Some days we get a dream. Sometimes the dream will be a bit scary, haunting.
Yep.
So what factor that influences those things?
The type of dreams? Okay. Yeah, there's a few things that happen when we're asleep. Because remember, it's only the body that sleeps, and only part of your brain that sleeps, and part of your mind. The rest of your mind is doing all sorts of things, and your soul's busy as well, because the soul doesn't need to sleep. Depending on how evolved our consciousness is, we're more cognizant of different aspects of ourself during sleep. So Bhagavatam explains that there's, you can see I keep mentioning Bhagavatam because I really want you all to read it, because you'll love it. Talks about different types of sapna, svapna, right? Different types of dream, and gives 4 different categories of dreams. So the first type is obvious, right? Very obvious. It's where our dreams are influenced by the sounds or things that are going on around us whilst we're asleep. So if a fire engine drives past your window, you might dream of a fire, okay? You might hear a loud bang, dream of an earthquake. Okay, it's just something that the mind's picked up and puts it together with some other impressions and gives you a picture. Then you've got the dreams which are, so these are more local. These dreams are local, they're just happening here. Then you've got dreams which are based on your desires throughout the day. So if you're really worried about work, you'll dream about your work. If you're worried about your children, you'll dream about that. You know, some of my patients who are going through psychotherapy, you know, they're talking about certain things in their life, and that's what they dream about at night. So, some of this is you playing out your desires. Some of it is also Krishna helping you to just burn off some karma in your sleep, so you're not having to endure it in your day-to-day life. But often it's mainly to do with day-to-day desires. There's another playground which we take our toys into. The third type is those dreams which we have where the subtle body is, our mind has opened up to memories of previous lives long ago. And you may dream, I know some people, they've dreamt of hellish planets, some have dreamt of heavenly planets, and something's getting unlocked. And Krishna doesn't do anything without a reason. These can be very powerful dreams in terms of making someone aware that there's more to this world than meets the eye. Repressed memories can come up. They don't even have to be of previous lifetimes. Perhaps repressed memories of this lifetime come up. And again, there could be some karma that needs to work out. Interestingly, so just jumping back to the second type, where your desires from the day are playing out, you can harness that as a tool. If you have a problem you need to solve in the day, whether it's a relational one or work one, you can actually do an intention setting before going to bed, and it can be resolved while you're asleep, even if you don't necessarily remember everything when you wake up. So then back to the third one, which is your past life memories. And then the fourth type is when the subtle body tends to leave this gross body and go to other realms and dimensions. Again, part of this can be working out karma, part of it can be desire driven, but part of this, depending on how evolved you are spiritually, can be quite literally from your own volition. So some people are very subtly evolved. They're not necessarily spiritually evolved, but they have siddhis. So they can move their subtle body in waking and in sleeping and go to other realms, like I told you about that boy who walked into the lecture. But when we're spiritually evolved, the same way, and by spiritually evolved means that, if we're spending a lot of our time in our waking life serving others, evolving our consciousness, evolving other people's consciousness, there's a very high likelihood when you're asleep you may be also doing the same thing. Okay, this is why people dream of their teachers. And some teachers, like Bhaktitirtha Maharaj, he was very, very, very consciously would come into people's dreams and direct them. I mean, I remember asking him once, I said, I dream of you all the time, and I remember most of the instructions, but sometimes I don't. There's some I don't remember. And he says, yeah, don't worry. He said, because they're in your subconscious, they're imprinted. He said, as long as you stay connected, when the time is right, they'll be activated. Okay, so equally, as we evolve, we can also do the same. Others, they don't develop that side, even though they're spiritually evolved. Maybe they don't need it for their students. They don't need to go so much in their dreams under control. Like Maharaj would he would have so much control over going into people's dreams, to the point where if you woke up in the middle of what he was saying and you said to him, oh, Guru Maharaj, you were telling me this and this and this, but I woke up in the middle of your sentence. He'd say, oh, what I was trying to tell you was. So for him, there was no sleep wake. It was just his body was resting. That's it. Others will come into your dreams because Krishna is using the form of your teacher because you're receptive to that person to tell you something. Because there's internal guru and external guru. And then we ourselves, of course, we can evolve to that point where we serve in many places. And when we're very, very evolved, then of course, if you're awake to your relationship with Krishna, then you also experience that even in your sleep. So what determines what type of dream you have and how you react when you wake up? The activities of the day, certainly, but the hour before bed, really valuable. What you do in your hour before bed has such a profound impact on what you will. It's like starting a new day. Just like your first hour when you wake up can have such a big impact on the rest of your day. You do some nice japa, read some nice books, hear some nice kirtan, that's it, you're set for the day. Even time bends for you, like it just manifests differently. The hour before you go to sleep has a massive impact on what you'll dream about. Equally, the time while you're asleep, what sounds you're surrounded by. Like for years now, I always have subaudibly either kirtan or japa playing, because sound has got 4 parts. Only 25% of sound is audible. Okay, you've got one part which is vibrational. Okay, that vibration is there, moving every molecule, atom in your body, mind, and soul. That's what transcendental sound vibrations moves your body, mind, and soul. Regular sound vibration moves your body and your mind, doesn't touch your soul because it can't penetrate there. It's not of the same frequency, right? So I keep that subaudibly because I get the vibration and somewhere my ear's hearing it. Then there's also the nature of the sound. So we've talked about it being transcendental and being Krishna. But there's also intention. Krishna's intention of his name is always love. So all of those things have an impact. So it's above the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. So I always keep that on because I know that I'm safe because I'm anchored through the power of hearing in sound vibration. And it, I was talking about the holy name being and Krishna consciousness being an antibiotic, right? But it's also a vaccine. It's protective. We get psychological and physical and spiritual resilience when we engage in spiritual activities by hearing, by reading. So look at what you read, what's around your bed, what kind of images do you have? Do you have a picture of Krishna? Do you have sacred books next to you? Ghosts, goblins, subtle entities who move around in the subtle realm, they'll stay away from you if you have that around you. You can have a peaceful sleep. So that's the other aspect of dreaming, is that just like here we have a human wireless network, while we're asleep there's the subtle entity wireless network. And they come. Our bodies are like houses. If they see a house unoccupied, if their defenses aren't strong, they'll go, hey, might move in here for a bit. Because if you're a subtle body, if you're a subtle body that's disembodied, you have desires, and the thing you want is a body to execute your desires in. Does that make sense? So I've given you like my lecture on dreaming condensed in like 5 minutes. But I know I have this habit. I feel like when someone asks me a question, I feel compelled to give as complete an answer as I can. Because I'm not a fan of these short videos. I mean, I have them on my Instagram and stuff, but short videos, short form, it's very easy to take stuff out of context. And I've seen the damage it's done to so many people, whether it's in mental health or spirituality. I've seen the damage it's done where people grab onto one statement out of context, and then it's just, misguided them. Yeah. Can I just check everybody's okay for me to take this question? Because I know you might be getting hungry, and Krishna and Swaha are such good cooks, it's like, don't want to miss out.
I just wanted to have a solution. Like I don't know what I did in my past. I have one friend. She is actually depend on me to say yes in her all these seasons. So like if she says something and if I say no, so she's just gone mad and she want my yes into it, and then she do that. So what I will do that she will be independent herself, not to take my decision.
So can I just clarify? You've got a friend who only does something if you agree to it.
Yeah, I mean she is happy if I am happy. I mean she's happy if I
just
say
in
yes.
your relationship or everything?
I don't know what. Sometimes she take her decisions with me, like if she wanted to do something at home, and she wanted to take any decision in her, in her careers, and if she wanted to do any function, she always I don't know, maybe in other things as well, but when she asks me, and I have to say yes. I mean, I have to say yes, then she's happy. Means I have to show that I'm happy whatever she's doing. So she's happy. She's dependent on me.
If you don't agree with what she's doing,
so she's mad on me. Like I said, no, this is not the correct idea, maybe. So she's mad on me and she want to teach me. Okay, she taught me all things, and then I should agree on the things. And then she's happy to do that. She will not do that thing until I say yes.
Can you give me an example?
Like she has a function at home. So I said maybe you can do some, the rituals kind of things. I say you do not this way. Maybe that way is the okay.
And she asked for your opinion on how to do it? Okay.
But she wants that other way, and I said some other way.
So she wants your opinion but doesn't want your opinion?
Yes, she wants my opinion, but she wants that I should say yes in her opinion.
Have you told her this? Have you told her this?
I told her that.
And what did she say?
Kind of disease. Like, why you want me in your... I think you should be confident in yourself, and then don't ask me. She said, I don't know, if you're happy, then I feel like I'm happy.
But you're not happy though.
I have to pretend I'm happy.
I think you need to talk to your friend. Like, explain to her that you're saying to me you only...
difficult time that I have no option sometimes, and I don't know, sometimes she tests me as well, and I have to say yes in everything. It's very difficult. I avoided her many times, like I don't take calls, so she will be happy without me. I ask her, don't depend on me, I am nothing. What I can do, I don't know.
You probably need to have a word with.
I mean, I think you do need to actually properly talk to her and tell her the truth. Tell her it makes you want to avoid her. It's a harsh truth, but if your friendship's worth something, and you can kindly tell her, look, you know, sometimes I feel like the only way I can give you breathing space is by avoiding you. Just tell her the truth.
I told her many times, this is a disease.
But then why do you carry on then?
She's my friend, I cannot avoid her.
No. Why do you carry on just saying yes when you disagree? That's my question to you.
She will not be happy if I don't say yes.
So why is she's not happy anyway, by the sounds of it?
I just want her to be confident, independent.
She's not going to be confident independently if you force yourself just to agree with her. That's not going to teach her
I'll be
confidence.
disappeared.
No. Stand your ground. You can say to her, I don't agree with that. It's not the way I do it. But if you want to take that decision and you're happily doing it, I'll support you. I don't agree with it, but I'll support you. We can disagree with people. In this world, we do things differently all the time, right? Whether you put flowers on the yagyo, whether you put coconuts, you know, people disagree over that. You can say, I disagree. I wouldn't do it like that, but I'll support you with your decision. So if you want her to be confident and you're comfortable disagreeing with her, just tell her that.
What I think always, I always want her to be independent.
No,
Don't ask me.
but it also sounds like you also want to avoid her getting angry at you. You want to avoid her getting angry at you because you said she keeps getting mad at you. So just as much as wanting her happiness, you also don't want her to get mad at you. Then you might need to lay some rules down about that. Honestly, express it. Say, look, you come to me with an opinion. Sometimes I'm going to disagree. That doesn't mean I don't support you. But getting angry at me to get me to change my opinion is not going to be helpful for our friendship.
She don't ask me anything.
That's not going to help. You don't mind her asking you. That's not what I'm hearing you say. You don't want her to get angry with you. You want her to be happy, yes. You want her to, you know, make decisions around, yes. But you also don't like that she gets angry with you and forces you to change your mind or fake changing your mind. That's the key thing you're avoiding. I don't think you care really how she does her yagya that much. Right? You care for her, right? You care for her, but you don't care how she does her yagya. Does that make sense? Like, unless you do. And you've asserted to her that it's my way or the highway. And so that's why it's important that she gets your agreement. So you need to maybe look into what your actual interest is as well. Okay? Be honest with yourself.
I'm very honest. I told her so many times.
No, but with your own motivations as well. Okay? With all the layers of it. Because being positive doesn't mean we ignore the shade. The shade often tells us something that we're ignoring. This is dead now. I've killed it. I've outlasted your battery.
One question. So, basically, I wanted to build a perception on like thoughts we get. So sometimes we get thoughts, irrespective of whether it is bad, you think bad for someone or like good for someone. So, I wanted to understand like how should I look at? Is it my will that I'm thinking about good or bad about someone else, or it's Krishna like he's putting thoughts in me like?
No, the things in the mind are from previous exposure, and we feed that previous exposure. Okay, so if you've encountered that person before, if it was a good interaction, maybe you've got good thoughts about them. If it was a difficult one, maybe you've already, just like we meet sometimes people who are like, wow, we really connect. Other times you meet someone that's like, oh my God, I can't stand this person. You have no idea why. Sometimes it's not necessarily the person themselves. It's that they remind you of someone from your past. Let me give you an example. If we've had a very difficult time with our mothers when we're growing up, we may find female authority difficult, regardless of who it is. If you've had a difficult time with your fathers, you may find men who remind you of your father difficult. You know, something about, does that make sense? So it's not Krishna putting thoughts in our head. You know, I mean, he says knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness comes from me. But to the degree that we take shelter of him, he aligns that knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness to align with our desires. Okay? So if our desire is to stay here, he will make sure our knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness works to facilitate our desires. Here it says in the Gita, as the super soul, I facilitate your desires. When our desire is, okay, Krishna, I want to reconnect with you, then our knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness is directed by him within the remit of what's due to come to us anyway. So he's directing, conducting, and so the car's the same, okay? Krishna's still directing the car, but the destination is different. Does that make sense? So when we take to devotional service, you may still get that negative thought about that person, but Krishna will do it in such a way that will help you to go in the direction which is closer to him. If you're saying to him, well, I just want to have a material life, I'm not interested in God, you'll have that same encounter with that person. Difficult. But your car will be directed away from Krishna. Does that make sense? So it's more he's the director according to our desires. It's not that he's putting thoughts in our head. But he does coordinate the orchestra to make the piece of music that goes in the direction that we want to go in. It's not necessarily that so in an orchestra, the violin's the same, the flute's the same, the piano's the same, but the conductor will, by the way they move the instruments and the beats and the rhythm, etc., can change the music entirely, right? Can change the conclusion. That's what Krishna does, as knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. But it's not like he's there feeding thoughts into us. The things in the mind are from all these impressions and these different lives.
But in this case, like it might be the case, like it might be someone else product, like that is calling on, and he some thought is coming in. Okay, I will hit him tomorrow badly. So that's why that thought is coming in my mind. So due to his product.
But if that person's got that strong a prarabdha with you, right? You're not going to get randomly plucked from the universe to punch that person. Okay, there's a reason it's happening through you. Okay, everything's down to an exact science. We have no idea. Traffic light systems, they look automatic, but they've been programmed by someone down to 30 seconds, 15 seconds, and it changes. Because there's people sitting there watching traffic. They literally watch the roads. They have huge screens where they watch the roads. They see something getting clogged up, they change the timing of the lights, right? You can still run a red light. It's up to you what you do with the light. So Krishna's there. He's watching. Everything's done to an exact science. And that's where this very important point about karma isn't just about what happens to us. It's about what we do with what happens to us. So a thought coming in your head is something that's happening to you. Okay, it's happening to you. Things in the mind happen to us. So if a thought comes, I'm going to punch this guy. Okay, but what are you going to do with that thought? For whatever reason it's come up in you, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to diffuse it? Are you going to upgrade your consciousness? Or are you going to act on it? This is why in the human birth, we're accountable. That's why in the human birth, we can take another human birth, we can get a degraded birth in the next life, we can get a heavenly planet birth, or we can exit this whole reincarnation altogether. In animal birth, they don't go against their nature. So you get your next body, next body, next body, next body. There's 8.4 million different types of bodies. And very few of them, a small proportion, are human. We go through a lot of different bodies before we get a human one, so don't waste it. But does that make sense in terms of Krishna's not plugging thoughts in your head? Ready for Prashad? Yes? Hare Krishna. Radha Kunja Bihari ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank you very much, Mataji, for a very intense and a deep class. A lot of points, a lot of learning, a lot of lessons, a lot to ponder upon. Thank you very much.
Thank
very
you.
Grateful to you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Go to the next part of the program, Gaur Arati by Sharan.